Well, good morning.
Good morning.
Chair Eisenberg, council members, executive officer now. My name is Mark Bradley. I'm a senior engineer with the Delta Stewardship Council. This is item 8, presentation of the U.S. EPA action plan for the San Francisco Bay Delta Estuary. This action plan was released by U.S. EPA on August 28th. It's particularly important in that it goes over 7 measures for improving water quality, restoring aquatic habitat, and improving management of the Bay Delta Estuary overall. All of these issues are addressed and discussed in the detailed plan, in the Delta Stewardship Plan, in one degree or another. And here to go over this plan this morning is Erin Forsman. She's an environmental scientist with US EPA Region 9. Erin previously addressed the council on back in February 2011 on the steps that led to this action plan. So she's going to go over a little bit of that background and more specifically the content of this action plan. We're pretty excited about this. With that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Forsman.
Okay, thanks for the nice introduction. So like Mark said, I'm here to give you a quick overview of the EPA action plan for the San Francisco Bay Delta Estuary. We released the action plan last month in late August. So EPA developed this action plan after assessing the effectiveness of aquatic life beneficial use protection by Clean Water Act programs in the estuary. And we really launched this effort last year by releasing an advanced notice of proposed rulemaking for water quality challenges in the San Francisco Bay Delta Estuary. And I'm not going to talk about the advanced notice of proposed rulemaking a lot, but when I do, I'm just going to say ANPR from here on forward. So the ANPR is a document that addresses 7 primary aquatic life stressors. We summarized all the science that we had about those aquatic life stressors and their impacts to aquatic life. And then we provided a description of the regulatory framework in place to protect aquatic life from those stressors. The next thing we did in the ANPR was to request public input. So we had general questions about whether or not commenters felt that Clean Water Act programs were adequately protecting aquatic life resources, and if not, what other actions could EPA take to help restore that protection. But then we also asked a number of very specific and technical questions about the stressors that we summarized. So I came here and gave a presentation on the ANPR back in February of last year. And then after that, the comment period closed, and we started the second part of the process where we were really evaluating Clean Water Act programs, and we were trying to answer those 2 basic questions. Are aquatic life beneficial uses being protected? And if not, what else can EPA do in its authority to sort of accelerate movement to get protection back to those aquatic life resources? So the first thing we did was really synthesize the public comment that we received. We reviewed it and summarized it and pulled a certain number of items out of it for further evaluation. We evaluated information that's coming in. As many of you know, working in the Delta, there are new articles published in scientific journals pretty much every month, and it's been 18 months about since the comment period closed. And then we wrote our final assessment report, and that really is the action plan plus a number of different appendices. The action plan is it's about a 20-page document, and it's based on a more detailed Clean Water Act assessment that's contained in Appendix 1. And Appendix 2 is a synthesis of those public comments. And all of this information is available on our website, and I have that address at the end of the presentation. So the conclusion really from the Clean Water Act assessment is that Clean Water Act programs are not providing adequate protection to aquatic life. And the 2 major sources, I guess, of evidence for that are really the long-term decline and also the recent sharp declines in pelagic and salmonid fish populations, but then also what we've documented here as abundant and persistent water quality impairments throughout the estuary that are caused primarily by contaminants. So then EPA went ahead and we identified these 7 actions that we feel will help us move forward into improving water quality and restoring protection for aquatic life beneficial uses. So this list includes actions that EPA can do ourselves, but it also includes actions that our state partners are more responsible for and that we provide a support role. Here, I'll go back one. I'm not really going to read these out to you, but we're reviewing them on the next several slides. So these are the 7 actions that we've prioritized. So the first one is to strengthen estuary and habitat water quality standards. This action refers to the need for the State Water Resources Control Board to update and strengthen the water quality standards contained in the 2006 Bay Delta Water Quality Control Plan. And the State Board's already started this process. It began in 2009 with their effort to update San Joaquin flow objectives. And in, I think, February or January of this year, they initiated the second phase of this process where they're looking to update or perhaps adopt new flow objectives. Some of them are listed up here on the slide, and these include things like the Delta outflow objective, Sacramento and San Joaquin inflow objectives. The old and middle river flows are being considered as perhaps a new way to state flow objectives, and then they are considering floodplain flows. So EPA is supporting the State Board in this effort. In March of this year, we held a low salinity zone workshop where we pulled together scientists to summarize the most recent information about the low salinity zone and its effect on fishery resources. And then we're participating in a series of workshops that are happening now that Dr. Goodwin referenced earlier this morning. There was one in September, and then we'll be participating in one of the panels on Monday. Okay, the second item on our list is advancing the Delta Regional Monitoring Program. This is really a new effort by the Central Valley Regional Water Quality Control Board to establish an efficient system for collecting, accessing, and evaluating contaminant water quality information. And this information would be used to support regional assessments of beneficial use protection and to prioritize the importance of stressors on aquatic life and other beneficial uses so that we can focus our corrective actions and put our dollars to where we'll get the biggest water quality improvement for the least investment. So EPA is supporting the Delta RMP effort. We have provided funding for the first two Pulse of the Delta reports, and we'll be providing funding for the third. The Pulse of the Delta report is really, it's a very accessible document that's I think easily read and understood by a broad audience, and it covers water quality topics that are timely, and it usually, well, the first one was just released in 2011, but their goal is to kind of carry the threads through the Pulse of the Delta reports and provide some kind of reporting on issues that are important, particularly that year, but then also to do some trends analysis over the years. So like I mentioned, the first one was released in 2011 in May, I think. The next one is due out next month. You can see the cover of the next one, a little sneak peek, I guess, of the front up here on the slide. And I think that is supposed to be released sometime in October, so keep your eye out for that. The Delta RMP also had a couple other things that they finished this year which are important, and I think I'll mention them now. They released their draft monitoring framework, which includes the questions that they want to answer, draft questions that they're hoping to answer, and it also includes includes, I think, a proposed monitoring strategy with design principles. And then they also just identified their steering committee, which I think they hope to collect and have meet next month. All right, next on the to-do list is accelerate water quality restoration through total maximum daily load programs. That's what TMDL stands for up there on the slide. So on the slide, you can see a map of the Sacramento River watershed, the San Joaquin River watershed, and the Bay watershed. And you'll see lots of blue and red lines and red blobs. So the red lines and the red shapes are water bodies that are listed on the current 2010 303D list of impaired water bodies. So water bodies on that list, water bodies in the red, have water quality impairments for which the regional water quality control boards have to establish a total maximum daily load program. So the action plan really focuses on what we can do to advance TMDLs that are already adopted in the watersheds. So in the Central Valley watershed and the San Francisco Bay watershed, there are 9 adopted TMDLs that address stressors we identified in the ANPR. There's 27 total.
Can I ask you a question?
Absolutely.
I couldn't find on the legend for this chart any explanation of what appears to be Central Valley area in yellow.
Oh, that's the legal delta.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't put on a full...
I thought it might be that, but...
Yeah, okay. Sorry about that. The yellow in the middle there is the legal delta. Okay, so EPA's action plan items are really focused on implementing the adopted TMDLs. So like I said, there are 9 TMDLs adopted in these watersheds that are focused on stressors we identify in the ANPR. And EPA's work so far is really to partner with the water boards to ensure that load limits are achieved in a timely manner and ultimately move toward taking these water bodies off the 303D list and restoring water quality to support beneficial uses. And I would, direct you to tables 1 and 2 at the end of the action plan. These contain kind of a summary of TMDL implementation for these 9 TMDLs plus the methylmercury TMDLs that's really not available elsewhere. So I think a lot of effort and, it takes a long time to get a TMDL developed and adopted, and our focus here is really from then on moving it forward and making sure that we actually achieve those load limits over time. Okay, the next item on the to-do list in the action plan is strengthen selenium water quality criteria. So the information that we were able to get, after the ANPR hasn't really changed much from what we have in the action plan. In that when we wrote the ANPR, we already knew that the existing selenium water quality objectives are not strong enough or low enough to protect aquatic wildlife or aquatic dependent wildlife and aquatic life that are sensitive to selenium. So EPA has been invested in this effort for some time now, and we hope that we will have a draft selenium water quality criteria by the end of this year that will enter the peer review process in 2013 and hopefully be released in a public draft in 2013. Those criteria are pretty likely to be lower than the existing objectives in water quality control plans. So for pesticide pollution prevention, the things I want to highlight here are not the really cool maps that you see up here, but I'll mention those last. I like GIS and I like these maps that they're from a very nice new tool we have. But the first 2 things I need to talk about are EPA's efforts really to improve pesticide pollution prevention. And the first one is an effort EPA Region 9 began with EPA Office of Pesticide Programs just this past year. And we're working to coordinate with them to collect water quality data that is collected here in California and get it to the Office of Pesticide Programs so that they can use it in the registration review process. And this pesticide water quality data is very much focused on those small number of pesticides which we know are causing aquatic toxicity here in California streams, especially in the Central Valley and in the Delta area, and are legally registered pesticides, and they're applied, per the labels and et cetera, but we're still having this issue with them. So we're trying to deal with that issue by using the regular Federal Insecticide, Rodenticide, and Fungicide Act registration review process. So that effort got started this year. And then the other thing we're focusing on for pesticide pollution prevention is working with the water boards to identify measurable and enforceable low-impact development strategies to include in urban stormwater permits and water quality certifications. So the maps up here that I wanted to highlight, this is a new tool that was produced with CalFed funding. EPA scientists worked with Department of Water Resource scientists, UC Davis, and some others to create a spatial and temporal modeling tool for pesticide loadings in the Central Valley and Bay Delta estuary. This tool, what you see up here on the map, you see, or up on the slide, are 2 maps. On the left-hand side, you can see what we call the spatial distribution for the month of July of pesticide loadings per 1 square mile public land survey system box. So the colors in pink are showing a high probability that pesticide loadings during that month on any given day, they have between almost 60 and 99% chance of exceeding toxicological benchmarks that are important for our aquatic life in the area. Then the map on the right shows the probability that sensitive species will actually be in those locations. So when you're able to overlap them, you can see where your priority areas might be, and that's where species will be where pesticide loadings are likely to be high. So this tool, it was very exciting that they were able to finish it, and we're really looking forward to seeing how this tool can be used to help us identify a monitoring design where now we know where to go to look where there may be problems, but then also the timing and location of using any of the number of best management practices that can help you really reduce movement of pesticides into aquatic habitats.
Can you explain that chart on the right again? I'm sorry, I'm slow.
The map on the right?
Yes.
Okay, yes. So the map on the right, if you see the areas in pink, you can see it's mostly streams because most of the sensitive species that were included in this project are aquatic species. So when you see pink, and I can't see the numbers up there, but there's a percentile up
It
there.
says 90th to 100th.
Right, okay. So that means that there's 90 to 100% chance that sensitive species are going to be there in those locations. And then the probability goes down as you go from pink to blue.
Okay.
Right. So where you have pink from species being there and then pink from maybe a high probability of pesticide loadings exceeding important toxicological benchmarks, that's where you might have problems.
Thank you.
Sure.
If I could just air that, so, but there's not, those don't coincide too often. Again, this is a large geographical area that's represented here, but.
Right, and it is hard to tell from this, this, I guess, scale of a map. But right, what you would do is, and they're all different for each month, but what you can do spatially in a GIS system, a geographical information system, is overlap them, and then you can identify those spots where it's happening. But right, so for the most part, you see a lot of pink kind of down along for species presence along the border between the Sacramento and the San Joaquin watershed boundary. And when you look then on the other side to see if you're having, a high likelihood of pesticides loadings going over those benchmarks, you don't see a lot of pink right in that spot.
Yeah, that was kind of my visual trying to do a comparison here. You didn't see, again, there are some points of overlap, but not, it's not like this map all clashes together. So.
Right, exactly. So what you would want to do is find those points of overlap, and those are places where it might be important to start using best management practices, like integrated pest management, et cetera, or even just to go to monitor. So it really depends on, I think, what your goal is. But this kind of tool helps us make smarter choices about where to spend our money.
And you have one for every month
Yes.
in the report?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so moving on, the next slide addresses methylmercury control and wetland habitat restoration. And those of you who might remember when I was here last, mercury and methylmercury were not addressed in the advance notice of proposed rulemaking, but they are included in the action plan. And the reason they were included in the advance notice of proposed rulemaking is that it is not generally thought that mercury is contributing to something like the pelagic organism decline as a contaminant. However, public comments that we received questioned why we didn't include it in the ANPR, but also pointed out, and we were also aware of this, there is a very difficult management challenge presented by mercury and methylmercury, especially in the Bay Delta, as we consider wetland restoration on 80+ thousand acres of habitat in and around the Delta that is unfortunately all being sited on areas that have mercury contaminated soils. So a lot of this wetland restoration is being cited for spots where we would do seasonal restoration or seasonal wetland habitats, and it's that wet and dry cycle that can methylate a lot of the mercury that's present. So one of the things that EPA thought was important, and one of the actions that we're actually able to take, is to fund research to find methods for reducing the formation and mobilization or movement of that methylmercury. So the two that we have a number, but the two that I'm focusing on here are funding that we're providing to the U.S. Geological Survey on Twitchell Island for their carbon sequestration project. They're looking into the ability to sequester methylmercury along with the carbon on their experimental carbon farm there. So that's one of the things that we're funding. And then another thing we're funding is the Dutch Slough Habitat Restoration Project, which is doing wetland restoration on those sites you see in the lower right-hand corner. That's just east of the city of Oakley. And that Marsh Creek moves through this site, and Marsh Creek drains the watershed that contains the Diablo mercury mine. So we will have to come up with methods here to really limit the formation and mobilization of mercury from this site as we restore it back to wetland.
If I could, Mr. Chair, just a question, though, back to the Twitchell Island.
Yep.
That's only a 15-acre parcel, if I recall. I mean,
That's correct. It's small.
Yeah, you reflect it, though. You say Dutch Slough Emerson parcel, so you call the parcel out. Here you show the whole island, so one might take from that.
Okay, good point. It was not my intention to say the USGS is doing it on the entire
No, I know it wasn't.
island.
You're
Okay.
clear about your.
Okay.
But if you did a comparison of these two, You look at it, you think.
Right. It would be very exciting if the carbon sequestration farm could be
We'd
that
support
size.
your ability to legally expand the obligation of USGS. Is that okay?
Oh, say that again? What? Probably USGS would not like me to do anything that legally binds them to do anything.
But just denoting parcel was my point. It might be good if you,
Oh,
if you
okay.
call out the parcel on the one in the lower right-hand corner. I think on Twitch Island, if you show the parcel, the general area where that's being at least piloted thus far, that would be helpful, I think. Here.
Right, thank you. That's a good point. I appreciate that. Okay, so the last thing we have, last but not least, certainly, is EPA support of the development of the Bay Delta Conservation Plan. And up on the slide here, I took a map from the Envisioning Futures project because all the maps that are available on BDCP website, you can barely see where the proposed tunnel alignment is going to go. So I tried to eyeball it and put it in a dashed line on this map. But the Delta Conveyance Project being part of the Bay Delta Conservation Plan, I wanted to just show it up here. So our support for the development of this plan really comes with two different roles for EPA. We have our NEPA role and our responsibilities under National Environmental Policy Act, where we will be reviewing and rating the environmental impact statement produced for the Bay Delta Conservation Plan. The other role is really under the Clean Water Act, and this is again an oversight role. For example, the Delta Conveyance Project may need to get a 404, a Clean Water Act Section 404 permit from the Army Corps of Engineers, and we have oversight on that program. So our focus here is really trying to help the Bay Delta Conservation Plan in ensuring that water quality and aquatic habitat beneficial uses are protected in the alternatives that they evaluate as they move forward. And with that, I'm just going to close the presentation. I would like to this is our website, point you all to the website if you need to go get any of the documents or support documents that we use to produce the action plan. They're all located here. And the website was recently overhauled, and we have some cool little nifty things on it now. We have an interactive watershed map that actually shows where all our funding from grant programs is going, which is very useful to use. And it also has a 303D impaired waters interactive portion to that. And then down in the lower left-hand corner, we have two Google Map flyovers of the Sacramento and San Joaquin watersheds as they enter the Delta. So I encourage you all to go and check them out.
Okay, Randy.
Aaron, thank you.
You're welcome.
It's an interesting report and an update on the previous one. Quite honestly, the button is pushed. On the pesticide pollution slide, it's a troubling slide. You look at the colors that refer to the 100th percentile. And you mentioned that that might indicate an area where you would want to emphasize integrated pest management practices. Did I understand your comment regarding this map?
I was just really using integrated pest management as an example of best management practices. So I guess maybe that was a poor choice to pick IPM, but just where you know you're going to have problems. The bigger point was where you know you might have issues where you have large pesticide loadings and you have species present, just that those might be areas where, and your point taken, that maybe it's best to say that those are places to put your structural best management practices, like your buffer strips and things like that, as opposed to something like IPM. So I just was searching around for my really quick example of best management practices.
That's fine.
Sorry.
But I was just curious as to what direction you were headed in terms of trying to fix these kinds of problems. And we know from pyrethroid loading in the American River that much of that is from backyard and home use. And we received a report several months ago about steps that I believe it was the regional board is taking to regulate further the structural pest control folks. But when you look at a map like this, it suggests that there's a lot going on out there, and probably more steps that need to be taken to reduce the loading.
And it's good that you brought up those questions. That's one thing I would note is that this this project and the spatial and temporal model, I wouldn't necessarily say that it's at the stage where you would start to use it for I guess, using into some regulatory choices. It's more like this is where you can, I would use it to inform where you would go look to see if you're having problems. It's a model that includes, I think, 41 or 42 different pesticides, so it's not just one one individual pesticide. You know, if you have a pink box, that might be because you are detecting 10 of them in one spot, and maybe 1 or 2 of them are going over toxicological benchmarks. So it displays a lot of information, but it's good to go back into those maps and really look like, okay, what are the specific chemicals potentially contributing to this? And then really go to see there if you're observing the actual problems. This tool will really help you focus where to go and look to see if they're there. Not necessarily to start, saying that you need to, nowhere near saying how you should use them, just this is the current use and this is where we may have issues. So it's really more of an informative tool at this point, where you can go and figure out, here's where I should start monitoring. Once you have those monitoring data, you could probably use it to help you cite where you could place your dollars to help restrict movement into waterways. Mm-hmm.
Just a couple of questions. Has EPA withdrawn the notice of intended rulemaking?
So the advance notice of proposed rulemaking.
Advance notice, I'm
yes.
sorry.
No, it's not withdrawn, but it is different than a notice of intent for rulemaking. The advance notice of proposed rulemaking is more of a scoping procedure. So we can leave it here and move forward, and we don't have to proceed with a rulemaking after this. And
I recall saying to you when you politely didn't reply at the last hearing that
was it saber rattling? Right.
Well, yeah, the saber rattling, and that is traditionally something EPA has done on occasion to prod state and local authorities to move more rapidly. I was interested in this document and your heavy emphasis on the water board completing flow standards and so on. You've got I forget the word that describes your relationship to the Bay Delta Conservation Plan, but you have a NEPA role and then you have a separate commenting role. Has EPA yet indicated whether, in their judgment, completion of the water board flow requirements is a precondition for NEPA requirements on the Bay Delta Conservation Plan?
No. So completing the state water board process being a precondition for NEPA. Our role under NEPA is really to evaluate, when they're ready to submit their final draft environmental impact statement to EPA. Mm-hmm. Our NEPA review office will receive that, and they'll evaluate the information in that draft environmental impact statement for the effects it has on the environment, and they'll rate it for that. And they'll also rate it for how good of job they did in providing information, disclosing impacts, and analyzing impacts. So they'll provide a rating there. I don't think there's really a spot where in NEPA review we would say completing the water quality control plan is a precondition to moving forward with your NEPA document.
Well, I was reading the report pages, and you gave us the extract, 21 and 22, where in regard to the BDCP, you had your focus is on 3 issues. One you call anti-degradation, but that seemed to me to be a generic pollution, human-caused damage to the water supply. And then the second issue was an analysis of diversion and conveyance facilities for their potential substantial impacts, direct or indirect, to the waters of the U.S. And then the third was the stuff that roped us in too on our statutory language on decreased reliance in the Delta. Now that's really kind of explaining your current view of the BDCP and the mixed array of issues that are coming up.
Right. So the first one for anti-degradation, that's really a piece that goes into water quality standards. So we would want to make sure that whatever for example, in the Delta Conveyance Project, whatever operation scenarios that they come up with and decide to evaluate for alternatives, that those operation scenarios do not violate state water quality standards, anti-degradation being one component of water quality standards. And that just basically means it can't be any worse than it was in '75 when the anti-degradation policies were put into place. And right now, since we're noting that aquatic life beneficial uses are not very well protected, I think we're looking for the State Water Quality Control Board to move through their process quickly and complete it before Bay Delta Conservation Plan, because we think that that will very much support Bay Delta Conservation Plan and help them identify a set of operations that will not violate state water quality standards, since the State Board will have taken their action first. So we see it as something that could be very supportive and beneficial to the BDCP process, if that answers your question.
Kind of.
Kind of, okay.
You're-
Well, there were two other, okay, so there are two
I
other
can
things.
conclude that you guys are still lurking or looming large potentially on this whole question of water quality in the Delta, and telling all of us to get our act in shape.
I think we're very much in a support role with Water Quality Control Plan and State Board, and success for us is them identifying water quality objectives that restore protection for beneficial uses. Similarly, it's very, I guess, similar to the Bay Delta Conservation Plan. The Clean Water Act role really depends on what permits for the individual projects they'll be going through, but the biggest project they're considering right now is the Delta Conveyance. And so the Delta Conveyance, through Clean Water Act Section 404, if they're going to need a 404 permit for that, has to comply with the regulations that run 404. And one of those is you can't violate water quality standards. So we're really trying to provide the same set of advice to both, in that we want to see information produced that supports the conclusions that water quality standards and aquatic life beneficial uses will be protected with the set of operations you come up with. And this equally applies to the larger restoration projects that are proposed to go forward in BDCP. So I think we're standing there ready, trying to encourage those analyses that let us figure out whether or not aquatic life beneficial uses will be protected under different alternatives that are considered for both the Water Quality Control Plan and for BDCP.
Okay. All right, questions? Don? I'm sorry? Looming, yes. Pat says looming is better than lurking for US EPA. All right. Ominously looming?
No, but they're
They're there. Okay. All
I've
right.
always thought it was a good thing we're here.
Okay. Yes, Chris.
Aaron, could I follow up on one question I had? Was in your action plan, did you make any proposals or address the question of adaptive management that's proposed in the Delta plan at all?
That's a good question. I'm not recalling all sentences in the action plan, but I don't think we directly addressed adaptive management in the action plan. We are addressing adaptive management in our submittals to the Water Quality Control Board for their update to the 2006 Bay Delta Plan. And essentially, I think our feedback on adaptive management, specifically with respect to the Clean Water Act, is that it's really built in the triennial review process. And if the State Board were to more assertively use that triennial review process, they could, at the outset, identify controlled experiments, perhaps, that they want to conduct, and try to identify information they're going to need to either make changes to objectives or to further refine maybe compliance points or compliance methods. But we're recommending that that's our position, that that's already built in. We just need to use it.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Anything else? All right. Ms. Forsman, thank you very much once again for coming back and talking to us.
Thank you for having me.
Okay.